Thank you, Madam Chair and members. My name is Ware Wendell. I'm the Deputy Director with the nonprofit, nonpartisan group Texas Watch. We work on a range of issues, including public safety and insurance issues. And first, Madam Chair, I want to thank you for holding this hearing. I want to thank many people in this room who are working hard to get this right so that we don't have another situation like we did in West. Vice Chairman Rodriguez, I want to thank you for the bill, because as I read this bill, this is a very balanced attempt to make sure that communities don't suffer another explosion like this. And in the event that they do, they will have the resources that they need to rebuild. We've heard some about the lives lost. 15 people perished in West, unfortunately and tragically. The estimates of those injured approach 300. And the facility in West, as was the case with all the other facilities in the state, did not have to carry any liability insurance whatsoever. They did carry a $1 million liability policy, but property loss estimates alone now reach $230 million. In the article that I passed out at the time, and that was shortly after the explosion, it cites $100 million, but it's been reported that the property losses could be as great as $230 million. So that facility was underinsured by a factor of 230. It was grossly underinsured. Public safety is important. It's the first and most important job of all of us here that care about these issues. And what this bill would do is it would harness the power of the private market to make sure that reasonable safety measures are being undertaken. We all have personal responsibility every time we get on the road. We have to have an auto insurance policy. And Madam Chair, I know you've served on the insurance committee for many years, and you're very well acquainted with the issue. And any time that there's risk posed by your activities, you need to be responsible. You need to be personally responsible. Representative Thompson, you know that better than anybody, given the good work that you do. And we know the risk posed by this particular chemical. We saw it in 1947 in Texas City, when nearly 600 people died. We saw it in West. We had a very near miss in 2014 in Athens, Texas, when a warehouse caught on fire, and thankfully they were able to put that fire out before it detonated. But it is just a matter of time if we don't do something different, and insurance is a big part of, a big piece to that puzzle. We owe it to the folks in West, but we owe it to the 20,000 people around the state that live in the shadow of facilities that store ammonium nitrate. And I'm happy to take any questions that y'all might have.
Members, Representative Thompson.
Yeah. You might not be the one to ask this question. Maybe I should have asked the author of the bill. But I was sitting here thinking about, in here I think it leaves it up to TDI to decide, coverage amounts and that sort of thing. And as been stated, it's been stated in the West explosion, how much is enough, and who's going to determine that, and how are they going to determine it, and what's that going to be based on? I've just got a lot of questions about who's going to do that analysis to be able to say, well, you need $230 million of coverage, liability coverage, and then maybe next year somebody comes in and says, now you need $300 million, or that next year it's another amount. Or I guess that's where I kind of struggle a little bit with this. And I know you can't go and say, well, everybody has to have X, because there's going to be some that are going to be in different situations. The liability is going to be different in different areas depending upon what's around them and everything else. But I guess I've just got a real question about that, and we can talk about that at some point.
It's a good question, and it's why I read this bill as being a very balanced approach versus taking that one-size-fits-all approach and saying everybody around the state, all 74 facilities have to carry X. Some of these facilities are in areas where they're far away from the population centers. Frankly, some of them, the population centers grown up around them over time. And so as I read the bill, TDI and the various state agencies would look at the different risk profiles posed by each of the facilities and take that into consideration. I mean, I suppose they could create tiers, if you will, or classifications. You're in the highest risk, you're medium, you're low risk. And folks would carry an appropriate liability insurance policy accordingly. I think the idea over time, frankly, would be that they would carry their premiums would be less because they would be adopting additional safety measures, and they could demonstrate to their private carrier, we're doing everything we need to do to be very safe and responsible with this chemical.
Right. Well, and you bring up a good point. I mean, you have some areas where there is no zoning, there is no one oversees what builds up around it, and people come in and build around a particular site, which the owner of that site can't say, well, hey, I don't want any neighbors, I don't want anybody out here, because that's going to have an impact on my liability in that situation. I mean, that's another thing I think that needs to go into the thought process about this is, how do we prevent probably people from locating around these sorts of places, and how do we go about doing that as well? I mean, that's, as you said, there's personal responsibility in that, and just because maybe I can buy some land adjacent to one of these places pretty cheap because nobody else wants it, and then all of a sudden I'm pointing my finger at them saying, well, you guys are not doing what you're supposed to be doing. Well, I bought that after I knew what was across the road from me, when I bought it. So
that's so true. And I want to be very clear. My family farms 640 acres. I'm very sensitive to the effect of ammonium nitrate, how important that is to rural communities in particular. And I don't think it's the intent of anyone in here to make it to where we can't have a thriving agricultural economy. It's just, if you're going to engage in activities that bear some risk, you need to be personally responsible for that risk as well, because otherwise we all bear the cost and the brunt of that as taxpayers, and that's not right. So happy to take any other questions that y'all might have.
Yeah. Vice Chair Rodriguez.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And you may not know this, but do you know TDI requires liability insurance in any other circumstance, whether it be trailer, anything, in any other capacity?
Well, we all have to carry minimum liability insurance to drive on the roads under the Financial Responsibility Act. If you're hauling eggs in a truck, you got to carry $750,000. And so those are two that come to mind, but I imagine TDI could give you a rundown of all the various mandatory insurance requirements that we have.
Yeah, I'm not sure if we have someone here from TDI, but that would be an interesting point. So we're required for things that are much less dangerous to have insurance. So appreciate your time. Thank you for
Yes, sir. Thank you for the legislation.